As always, Scott Carson, excited to be here with you today. If you're listening for the first time, hey, thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe and leave a 5-star review. If you're listening, hey, thanks for all of our long-term listeners out there. I am so honored every time one of you books a call with me and tells me that you're watching the YouTube video or you're listening to the podcast, whether it's on Spotify or Apple iTunes or any player. I am always humbled. So thank you. Keep those calls, keep those messages, keep those reviews coming. We're really, really proud of the fact that you guys do that. And it literally keeps me going. But today's episode, I want to talk about mistakes that we see people making when it comes to owner financing a property, whether it's residential, commercial. There are some big mistakes people are making that is shooting them in the foot. And it's not always their fault. I mean, it is their fault because they agree to it and they may not do a lot of research on it. But the most aggravating thing I get is I've had friends, colleagues, people that obviously listen to the show, and they decide to owner finance a note, a purchase, and they don't pick up the phone and give me a phone call to make sure that that note is either structured properly or the terms are at such so that they get the biggest bang for the buck if they're looking to sell the note. Now, that's where I want to get into. People out there that teach owner financing, yes, it is a strategy to help you sell where you don't necessarily have to take all your profits on the front end. You're not going to have to worry about a 1031 exchange. You're not going to have to worry about short-term or long-term capital gains in a lot of cases. You pay less taxes because you only get a partial down payment. The rest is spread over time and treated on your cash flow debt base. Those are great strategies, okay? Nothing wrong with that. The big issue I get is when people talk about, oh, if you owner financing, you're going to get all this cash flow and payments over 10, 20, 30 years or 5 years. And I agree. Yes, you will get more. But the biggest problem with that is if you have to sell the note. And if your note's not structured properly, you're going to take a discount in a lot of cases. And depending on what the credit score of the borrower is and what their FICO looks like and what's going on, the value of the property, those are issues too that are going to really hurt you in the long run if you try to sell it. Like I've got a guy that called me up, wants to talk to me about a note purchase or buying his note. And I'm like, okay, he's telling me it's on a acreage, the guy put a chunk of money down, which is great, but the interest rate is below market. It was even below market was originated back last year. And I asked him, I said, why did you come to this interest rate? Because it's below market. I think it's a 6% interest rate. I'm like, it's below where rates are at right now. Well, that's what we had to use to get the payment to work. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But if it's to an entity in a lot of cases versus an individual, you shouldn't have done. I mean, even you shouldn't be giving somebody a below market rate. Now, I get the guy brought a big chunk of cash to the table. I get it. But if you are interested in selling it, and this note's only been around since like 3 or 4 months. So there's not a lot of seasoning to it. And I'm like, and I was talking to the guys like, did you think you were going to sell? Yeah, I planned on selling the note immediately. I'm like, well, then why didn't you pick up the phone and call me? Ask me. I will tell you or point you in the right directions to structure the note. Now he's taking a big haircut and is not happy with it. But I'm like, listen, then you expect to hold on to this note for a period of time and get your monthly cash flow then, because that's what how you structure the deal to fulfill it. And I got another guy too, on a commercial property. The paperwork looks a little funky, same thing. Payment interest rates below market. The guy did bring a chunk of cash down, stuff like that. But same thing, it's a below market interest rate. And I get it, but it's frustrating because it's not structured properly. It doesn't look like it's written on normal documents. There are things on the mortgage that just don't make sense. So the best thing I can tell you is, first and foremost, these are the things that I would highly, if you're going to structure a note deal and owner finance your property, whether it's a residential, commercial property, these are some things to keep in mind. All right. These are the facts that are going to help you potentially get the most for your note. When in other places, if you don't do this, you're going to lose some money. So the first thing is down payment. That's the biggest thing. And here's the thing. I would not be owner financing a property when you're getting less than 10% of the purchase price down. So 10% down payment at a minimum, okay? Second thing, don't overprice the asset. So like if you were to try to sell the property conventionally and comps come back at say 400, well, don't sit around and turn around and owner finance it at 450. Well, if you owner finance at 450, It's only really truly worth 400. Yes, you're the bank in terms of value. I get that it's one of the selling point, but don't over. You might get away with being able to do that for a few grand, 5, 10, 15,000, something like that. Or if it's a bigger asset, maybe more. But the point is, if it won't sell at 450 in today's market, it sure is probably not going to sell at 450 in the next 12 months. So you're just going to lose that difference in a discount, depending on what the seller brings to the table. So let's lose that number. So let's just say somebody owner finances a house that's worth 400 at 450. The borrower brings 10% down, right? They bring 45 grand down. Well, when you go to sell that note, the note seller is going to look at, well, the borrower owes 405. The house is really only worth 400. You're going to take a 20-25% discount, probably depending on what the interest rate is, or more, to get below 75 or get below 80% LTV. So they might offer on that 320. Well, then you just lost that. The money didn't make any sense. You took a big discount. So that's the first thing, is making sure that's really two things: making sure you're getting 10% down, and second, you don't over finance the property. The third thing that's most important is interest rate. Okay, make sure you give a market interest rate of what's going on. Talk to somebody. What are interest rates in today's market? And then, yes, if interest rates go up, guess what? And you underfinance interest rate, you're going to take a big discount, because most investors, note buyers, are looking for somewhere around a 8 to 10% cash and cash return. So that's what they're going to take a discount to make sure they're getting that 8, 9, 10% return on their money. If you've got a 6% interest rate and they want to get 8, guess what? You're losing roughly 30 cents on the dollar, 33-cent discounts, just so they get based on cash flow. So that's an easy consideration there. Don't come below market if you give somebody like a ridiculously low interest rate. Like we had a guy years ago, and I don't understand when he's like, well, I gave somebody a 4% interest rate. I'm like, could they get that on their, you gave them a 4% interest rate in their house and they got like a 500 FICO score? They're like, yeah. I'm like, why? Well, I just thought it'd be nice. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. If an investor wants to get 10% of their money, it means you're only technically getting 50 cents on the dollar if it's a 5% interest rate. So keep that in mind. 6, 7%. Obviously, the more somebody brings down, that's a helpful thing, right? But still keep that in mind. You're going to take a bit of discount. Now the next thing you need to do is make sure that to help you, make sure you still split it up. If somebody brings 10% down, still do don't do more than a 75, 80% first at the max, and then do a second, do a carry back second. You're technically carrying back the whole property, but what you're doing by splitting up and doing a 75 to 80% first lien and a 10 to 15% LTV on a second is that you're taking less of a discount. Because if you only have one note for, say, 90 cents on the dollar, and the seller's only going to give you 70% of value, well, then you just lost 20%. But if you have a 75% first and a 15% second, well, guess what? You can sell that 75%, only take a 5% discount. You're still holding back that 15% second mortgage for cash flow. So you don't lose as much. And that's one of the most important things. Structure these with a first and a second. Now, of course, if they bring like 30, 40% down, then you're not going to take a big, not structure for a second. But somebody's not bringing 20, 25% down, then you really need to make sure there's a first and a second lien in there. And you can make them the same interest rate, okay? 7, 8%, interest rate. But that's the thing, is don't expect to sell it and get full par. And that's the biggest thing. You need to put these with a third-party servicing company or an escrow company that's collecting payments from on a regular basis. Don't you be collecting payments. Put it with a third-party servicer. It's worth paying the $25, $30 a month with FCI or somebody else out there to collect on your behalf. Because that third-party servicing turns out to be really, really valuable, because now that all the documentation, all the note information that they've got is easily transferable to the new note buyer. And it actually adds value to it. I mean, you can actually write in the servicing costs so that somebody's paying principal, interest, tax, and insurance, and servicing in an owner finance note. So it's actually being paid by your borrower instead of just you. So that's one thing you write in there, okay? Another thing that's important is, and I hate this, but make sure that the borrower that you're buying from has a decent FICO. Look, if you're not going to, first and foremost, if you're just selling one note primary, you can get away without having to run it through an RMLO, all right? But if you are going to be doing more of these, call the underwriter. And I mean that, go to calltheunderwriter.com, have Max Bailey and his team take a look at your borrower, have your borrower pull a Credit Karma score, at least something to show credit score, so you can see where it's at. And if they have a low credit score, and by low, I really mean below, it's like 660, 680 or below that, you're going to take a bigger discount because they're not paying their bills on time. Now, if they got a 680 FICO or greater, then that's not going to be a detriment to your deal. But you also got to make sure that if it's on an owner financed house, that's going to be the primary, make sure that their DTI, the debt to income ratios, isn't through the roof and stuff like that. So that's the thing to keep in mind. That's why you would want to have an RMLO, like calltheunderwriter.com, to take a look at your borrower to make sure that that note is Dodd-Frank compliant. Now, if it's not Dodd-Frank compliant, then that you need to take a discount. Now, we had one of our students, Cal, was evaluating a couple owner finance notes down in the Valley. These were on mobile homes that were actually secured, so the tongue was removed. They were actually had a certificate attachment, and these borrowers didn't have a credit score. I think they had a green card, and I don't know. They might have been illegals living there, but the borrower did not have a credit score, right? And so the seller of these properties, the owner financed them, didn't run them through RMLO, so they technically were not Dodd-Frank compliant loans. Now, there was some equity there. The borrowers brought some down payment to it, and the interest rate wasn't too bad. But the fact that the paperwork wasn't Dodd-Frank compliant, which means that we don't know what their DTI scores were, don't know what the financials were. Those really lessen the value of the actual paper. All right. And when Cal ran it by an attorney and ran it by some of the things, he said they all came back and said, this is a big flag, especially ran it through a third party like having Finac USA take a look at it. They came back and said, yeah, we wouldn't buy this paper because it's not Dodd-Frank compliant. And that's one of the most important things to have is if you're going to do this on a regular basis for our strategy, don't try to, save you a few $1,000 or a few $100, stuff like that. Make that process of having your borrowers get evaluated by call the underwriter or some other RMLO out there to go through the process. Not all RMLOs are created. Some are much more expensive. There's an attorney out of Dallas who's made a living doing that, and I think he's just through the nose expensive. We've got an attorney here in Austin, Texas, who's been known to do a lot of that stuff and charging like $3,500. I think that just gets to be a bit ridiculous. That's why we like Max Bailey, because it's not too difficult. And in fact, for $200, you can have them evaluate your borrower and fill out the paperwork and go from there. But that's the thing. You have to realize, ladies and gentlemen, you want to make this paper. And I get it. If you're brand new to this and you've never done it, it may not sound good, but pick up the phone and call someone. Do some search on owner financing, ways to get it done. Now, if you're in a distress situation and you're selling the property, and it might make sense for you to just do subject to get a cash infusion and then just turn over the mortgage, to the borrower, provided that you've got some clause, and we can talk later about that as well. Maybe close through an attorney and stuff like that as well too, or put it in a trust and other things like that. But that's different. I mean, if you're distressed, there's some other things that you can do to do that. And I highly recommend that you book a time with me by going talkwithscottcarson.com and book a time on my calendar, talkwithscottcarson.com. I'm here to help. But that's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, is if you look at these things and you are thinking about it, ask a professional. Don't ask the person that's getting owner financing from you. Of course, they're going to want to structure the deal that works best for them. Okay. But let's review this. Quick list on this stuff is making sure that you get at least a 10% down payment, that you're not over financing the property, that your combined loan to value or what you're selling it for is not way more than what the property's worth. If you're planning on selling the note in less than a year, don't sell it. I mean, don't owner finance it. Sell it traditionally. Okay. Making sure you put a first and second so that your first isn't really more than 75 or 80% LTV. If you're getting less than 20% down payment, carry a second. Structure it with a first and second, and then tell the seller, like, listen, I'm structuring this. It's going to be the same payment, whether it's a 90% one mortgage to you or it's a 75-15. It's the same payment, paying same month, but it's allowing me to be more creative if I ever have to sell that note. Okay. It's allowing me to make it more marketable. Don't give a below interest rate to your borrowers. Making sure pull FICO credit score, something like that. If it's an LLC, they're going to put it into, get the credit scores of the actual borrowers that are going into that. That's a new one we came across. Having your borrowers make sure it's going through a Dodd-Frank compliant. Make sure it's a loan that they're actually valuable enough. Having a third-party servicer collect payments for you. You can put a balloon on there as well. If it's a residential loan, you can do it with an individual aspect of that's going to help a little bit more. Commercial is kind of normal. And then last but not least is, like I said, make sure you know what you're going to do. And this is one of the most things. If you plan on selling the note and think you're going to do it in 6 to 12 months, and somebody tells you that's a great idea, then run your deal by a buyer. Give me a phone call. Hey, what should I do? What can I make this most valuable aspect of things? How can I structure this so if I do sell it, I'm going to come out and take less of a discount and take less of a hit? Okay, because that's the thing they're not talking about. They're all these classes like, oh, how much money you're going to make in cash flow, and yes, you can turn around and sell this note. It's not the same thing. You have to understand that the market's changed than what it used to be. Yeah, when we first started doing note deals back years ago, in the Office of SMI funding, we would structure owner finance deals, and you could sell the note at the closing table, and you could probably get 80, 85 cents on the dollar for those first liens and stuff like that. But that's changed. You've got to have seasoning. You've got to have some on-time payments. You really need to make sure that it's a Dodd-Frank compliant loan that's the most valuable to you. And so that's the thing is expect if you need cash now, don't owner finance it. Okay. But if you do plan on selling it, then still want to do that, then structure it so that it works the best for you. First, a second plus down payment, making sure you get credit scores, making sure you're Dodd-Frank compliant, making sure it's with a third-party servicer and going for. And these are things that I see people leave out all the time, and ends up costing in the long run. And they end up like, oh, I didn't know I was going to take a 10% or 20% or $80,000 discount off of this. And that's what you got to keep in mind. Owner financing can be a great strategy if you don't need the cash or don't need to cash in on that note in 12 months. If you need it less than 12 months, then don't do it. Wait out, maybe find a different buyer for it. And of course, that's something you got to keep in mind too. If you don't have a buyer, as things are dragging out a little bit, you got to be prepared to do that. If I sell this in less than 12 months, and we all get things happen, emergencies, people get sick, lose jobs, they need to cash and get capital. I get that. But that's where it may make more sense for you to structure a partial payment instead of selling off the whole thing. Get a chunk of cash based on 6, 7, 8, 9 years of payments, and then you're back in this driver's seat again. And that might be a way for you to avoid having to take such a big discount. Of course, you're going to lose some money on the payments, but you're not going to lose out in the whole amount on the back end. And if the borrower doesn't pay, then whoever bought the note, you foreclose, they get paid off, and you still get the overage above and beyond what they paid the note for. So anyway, guys, like I said, feel free to reach out to me, talkwithscottcarson.com. Give me the full details of the asset. If you got a copy of the mortgage note, email that to me. We'll take a look at that, run a couple bids through our system, through some of our buyers, and come back with the best bid for you that we can for you. So hopefully it was valuable for you. If you're thinking about owner financing, pay attention to these things and talk to a professional first. And like I said, we're here to help. Do we charge to do that? We don't charge to give you a bid, but if you do end up deciding to take a bid, we will take probably a point or 2 points off the payment amount for our time and for resources, because it's doing a business. So go out there, take some action, everybody. And like I said, before you decide to own or finance, make sure you talk to a professional note buyer to make sure that you can structure that deal to be the best possible deal if you need to sell it in less than 12 months. So go out, take some action, everybody, and we'll see you at the top.